Evolution is a topic taught in 90% of schools as a concrete rule of reality. Then why is it still called a theory? I hope atheistic and those of faith alike will watch this with an open mind and a lack of disdain while I point out the fatal flaws of evolution. I am a person who has been taught the exact same thing as most of you, that in the beginning was nothing, then nothing created everything. That the perfection of life, sentience, and creation is all happenstance, coincidence, and chaos perfected. The question I'd like to ask you is, how do you know it was an accident? How do you know it wasn't by design? If, since the dawn of man's observations, we have never observed life coming from non-life, how can we call it a settled science? If you have to have faith to believe it, despite the gaps in logic. Many people ask, what came first, the chicken or the egg? But I have a better question. There are 12 systems of the human body, all of which are dependent upon the other systems. What came first, the respiratory system or the circulatory system? If the circulatory system came first, was it the heart before the blood or the blood before the heart? If none of these systems can work without each other, how can they come into being separately? How can little mutations eventually create an accidentally perfect conglomerate of bodily systems that can't work independently of each other? How could any system develop independently via adaptation? And how come we have never seen one in development despite the amounts of research on evolution? And secondly, regarding evolution, what evidence do we have for it? Let's get into that now.
One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for evolution is the fossil record. Fossils are the preserved remains of ancient organisms, and they provide a window into the past. By studying fossils, we can see how life on Earth has changed over time, and we can see how different species have evolved, how some have gone extinct, and how new ones have emerged.
Allow me to be clear. Of course animals can go extinct. It happens today. However, speciation, which is observable today, does not evidence new animals existing, nor do similarities in skeletal structure prove or evidence that they came from a common ancestor. What we are dealing with here is called a presupposition, meaning an assumption based on an implicit bias. In other words, you have to have faith it's true. Let's continue into more evidence issues.
Our own body is an evolutionary masterpiece. Tailbone is a vestigial structure that once served a purpose in our primate ancestors, but no longer has a function in humans. It is a remnant of our primate ancestors who used it for balance while climbing trees.
You sure about that?
The tailbone. Anatomists classify the coccyx bone as an irregular bone, and it makes up the inferior portion of the vertebral column, which is part of the axial skeleton. And this bone allows for the attachment of several muscles and ligaments. It provides support for the pelvic organs, and it stabilizes you while you're sitting down.
Our ability to get goosebumps is another example of our evolutionary heritage. Goosebumps are evolutionary remnants of our primate ancestors' hair raising to appear larger to intimidate predators, as well as using it for thermal control.
Goosebumps are a response to stimuli, yes. Stating that they have come as an evolutionary trait is making a pretty large leap in logical trains of thought. You have teeth, and animals have teeth. Does that mean that we are related? Again, we have faith that the evolutionary process is true based on mutual observations.
DNA provides some of the most compelling evidence for evolution. DNA is the code of life, and it holds many secrets about our evolutionary past. By comparing the DNA sequences of different species, we can see how closely related they are and how they have evolved over time. Thus, the evolutionary tree of life can be mapped out through DNA analysis, showing how all living organisms are related and evolved from a common ancestor. For example, humans share about 98% of our DNA with chimpanzees, our closest living relatives.
DNA, also referred to as the Book of Life, it holds the genetic code for how tall you will be, the arrangement of all your bodily systems, and every detail of your physical body. Although DNA has never been recorded having genetic code added to it, unless through man-made physical intervention via devices like CRISPR, it has, however, been viewed in showcasing mild mutations, none of which have ever been shown to change people into animals, or vice versa. And at the end of the day, we have the same problem, a gap in logic and reason that has to be bridged by faith.
Humans share approximately 60% of their DNA with banana plants, 85% of the same DNA as dogs, 88% of the same DNA as mice, 85% of the same DNA as cows, 73% of the same DNA as zebrafish, 69% of the same DNA as platypi, 65% of the same DNA as chickens, 47% of the same DNA as fruit flies, 25% of the same DNA as rice, 24% of the same DNA as wine grapes, and 18% of the same DNA as baker's yeast.
Alright, so what's my point? Did we evolve from bananas? Or rice? They say because our genetic code is shared that we have a common ancestor. But then the question is again, how do you know? Is it observable? Is it provable? No. One of the biggest issues regarding the theory of evolution is that there's much in the way of speculation, and the only real evidences have been adaptability and, of course, speciation. We have to build a solid foundation using genetics and DNA to prove that we are related to animals and bananas, and that requires a lot of assumptions outside of observability. Therefore, you have to have a presupposition and put faith into it without seeing proof. We have seen adaptability in animals and bacteria to show that diets and behaviors can change. We have not ever witnessed E. coli turning into botulism, nor a fox into a bear. So the ultimate point that I am making here is that evolution is a faith, not a set-in-stone science that is provable beyond reason and observation. Not to mention, if the perfectly designed systems in all living and sentient bodies cannot be formed or created or operate independently, then how could it have been an adaptation that slowly took over time? Wouldn't it be more likely that it was perfectly designed and created at a singular moment? Most of us, including atheists and agnostics, of which I once was, are fully aware of the biblical creation story, that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and that following that he created the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the animals of the land, and of course, inevitably, man. Then woman from Adam's ribs. Did you know that ribs just so happen to be the only bone that fully regenerates substantial portions after they are removed? I was once opposed to the idea of creation because I had been taught evolution was settled, but after using logic and science I realized it's a faith. And I could make my own conclusion that considering ecosystems, organism systems, and the perfection and harmony of our atomic cellular bodily economies, that literally everything in this world has to be in perfect order in order to operate. Of course, there is the obvious. In the observable world we live in, that there is no creation from nothing. One final question. How would have the accidental sentient life reproduced without a reproduction system? I'll leave that one for you to decide. We either got very lucky or there was intelligent design from the start. Which is it? I'll leave that to you to decide. But as for me, I believe creation is the only logical answer.
I heard a song